Hi, and thank you for joining us for another week of Inspiring Honesty. I'm your host, Greg Brahe, and I'm an atheist. This week, once again, I will be joined by my marvelous co-host, the unconventional pastor, Bob Greaves, and I am broadcasting from on location today in Eagle River, Wisconsin, where nothing particularly exciting or relevant to this show is happening, other than the fact that today is my 6th year anniversary with my wife, and we are up at the place we took our honeymoon here in Eagle River, but we brought her parents and our son along. It's not quite the same in that respect, but it's a significant anniversary for us this year because this is I know it's 6, which doesn't seem like much, but this is the first anniversary we've celebrated as a married couple that we didn't celebrate as a dating couple. We've now officially been married for more than half of our relationship. So that's exciting for us, and my wife was thrilled that I left for a couple hours to do the shows, but I'm laying more specifically on the ground outside of the public library here to get the internet connection. But I love doing the show, and she understands that, so it is exciting for me to be a part of this. And that's, oddly enough, what I wanted to talk about a little bit more today. It's a little bit off some of the topics that we've been covering, a little bit on the lighter side, but I wanted to talk about passions and sort of the way that we can find directions and find meaning in our lives. And it is related in many ways, I guess, to atheism and to theism in that respect, because many people do find their meaning in their lives in the idea of an afterlife, or find their direction and feel it is a calling from a higher power. So I obviously, as an atheist, don't get that. And it is something that has been very important for me to find meaning and direction and things I can be passionate about in my life. And I'm curious how Bob feels about that subject. Bob, what are your thoughts?
Wow. To me, meaning is in the moment. And it is the moment in the perspective of things. And of course, as a theist, no doubt, my theism plays a role in how things fit into that perspective. But as you might be able to guess, I really think that theists have a bad habit of using their belief in God as a substitute for a meaningless life. And they try to find meaning in the life they hope that is to come as a contrast to this meaninglessness of their current life. To me, that's a cop-out and an abuse of theism. So I certainly wouldn't be that kind of a theist. To me, the meaning that is most important in life is the meaning that is very present right now, if that makes any sense.
That's rather cryptic. I'm going to grant you that. I mean, the reason that I bring that up is because one of the most common arguments against atheism is, well, if there's no ultimate purpose to life, if you're not a creation that is meant for a reason or was made by an intelligent and willful creator to fulfill some purpose greater than yourself, ultimately, once you die, there is no meaning to your life if meaning is something that exists only within you. So what's the point? That's a question that's very commonly laid against us.
I can't relate to that kind of thinking. I mean, if to think that my meaning is based upon some purpose for which I was created is a way of definitely stating that meaning is outside of myself. It's in my opinion, an abandonment of my responsibility to bring meaning to the circumstances. I don't see why there has to have been a purpose or say a calling behind my existence. It's just good enough I exist. I'm here. Let's make the most of this. We got this wonderful opportunity to be. So I don't want to turn my belief in God into some sort of excuse for failing to have found meaning in my life.
I I have to say that this is something that, of course, you and I are going to agree on, in that, because I can't disagree with anything that you said, other than the portion about being a theist. I don't know. The question itself strikes me as odd. The idea that I, I don't know. I mean, when somebody asks me that question, the first thing that goes through my head is, so if you were to find out today, I mean, if in some way science were to prove definitively, or philosophy or anything were to make an absolute proof that there is no God or there is no afterlife, would you just put a bullet in your mouth? I don't understand what what you could possibly mean by that. I mean,
Uh,
being alive is such a reward itself that
it is. And you know what? I think also the good works that were supposedly, called, as it were. I'm just using old language. Uh, for example, why should we feed the hungry? How about this? They're hungry. you know, uh, why not do that? Why do good to others? It's a good thing to do. I guess, yeah. To me, I want to avoid the sense of allowing my belief system to, in some ways, trump the responsibilities of the present reality that I can only know for certain that I actually have. That which I have by faith may help me put this into perspective. But if I put that into such a perspective that it trumps the reality that I'm dealing with, something's wrong with that, as far as I'm concerned.
this harkens back to me in many ways to the thing that I wrote earlier this year when somebody asked me what I believe in, or what do I believe. And it's very true that the things that I believe about life, I mean, my personal philosophy, are very strongly related to what I'm passionate about and to the meaning that I find in life. And unfortunately, my passion is one that many other people struggle to understand. I mean, let's be frank, it's a little bit weird to be as concerned with the subject of religion and
Hmm.
philosophy and theology as I am, without thinking that, I mean, that theology or religion has any truth to it. So it's
Let me ask you a question. Do you know people who are believers who claim that their life has meaning in Christ? And without identifying who these people are in particular, do you know any of these people who are so wrapped up in the meaning of life that they find in God that they really live lives that are pretty much useless here on earth?
I have to say that I think I have had a pretty good sampling of believers in the category of those who find their primary purpose in God. But I don't know if I've met any that are devoting so much of their lives to it, unless, of course, you were to count those who have entered the clergy. But even them, I mean, their lives are extremely useful in many ways. It just might not be the life that I would have chosen, or even the ones that they would have chosen, if it weren't for the fact that they were so convinced that there was an afterlife or something,
Now,
some sort of divine realm.
kind of the difference between, say, a two-dimensional image and then something stereoscopically that's three-dimensional, it has depth to it. But the depth that the three-dimensional picture has does not in any manner destroy the nonetheless the potential beauty in the two-dimensional experience. And there's a sense in which my belief in an afterlife, my belief in God, adds depth to what is here. But it doesn't. How can you add depth to something that is to beginning with meaningless? And although I certainly wouldn't say that all theists live meaningless lives, I know too many that to them life is really all about the next shot they get at it, not this one. and that's sad. I mean, they're basically twiddling away the hours and days of their life, something they have in their hand right now for something they hope to grab flying out of the bush later. Uh, I say, why does this have to be an either or thing? Why not live a full and abundant and meaningful life now and then cap it all off? I, I just don't get that. To me, it,
In a way, it's related to the Epicurean response to Pascal's wager. I say response, even though Epicurus, I believe, wrote it well before Pascal asked it. But the concept of, isn't it better to gamble on the safe side and believe that there is a God? Because if there isn't, then nothing's lost. But if there is, everything is gained, is sort of Pascal's wager. And Epicurus responded proactively that we should live a good life. If there is a God, and that God is just, and I'm paraphrasing here from memory, so forgive me if it's not an exact quote. It's also in a different language, so it won't be an exact quote in the first place. But if there is a God and that God is just, then we've nothing to worry about. If there is a God and that God is unjust, then it's not a God that we should be concerned with in the first place. And if there is no God, then we've still lived a good life. So I think that your comparison to, the depth without breadth is a very astute one. I mean, what is a depth without breadth or width other than a line? It's
just a picture turned sideways. Can't even see it. Yeah.
One dimension, and I think that is the key to finding meaning in life, is to recognizing that it has to go in multiple directions for you to have any sort of dimension at all.
But have you ever read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning?
I've not. I have it on my Nook ready to go, but I've not yet read it.
Yeah, it's an excellent book, and not to ruin it for you, but in brief, he was actually a psychologist, a Jewish psychologist who ended up being in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany. And he noticed, of course, that there were some people who seemed to almost die right away just from apparent natural causes while before they were even executed or anything, and other people who seemed to just endure no matter what. And he tried to take a look at it and make sense of it, and he finally he came to an awareness for himself that he actually found the meaning of life in a concentration camp, which is like strange when you stop to think about it, of all places. And of course, this is a place where he's stripped of everything. He has no power, he has no freedom, all of his possessions are taken away, all of his accomplishments in life are of naught, and yet he found that the one thing they couldn't take away from him was his great source of meaning. He could choose how he would perceive and respond to the circumstances he was in. And he could still make choices. And when you stop to think about it, it's just a powerful reality. And he found great meaning in that. And then later, of course, after he gets out of the concentration camp, that focus, now with opportunity, was just expanded his options for exploring that meaning. But it's part of where I've come up with this idea that people say, can you find meaning in life? And my answer is no, but you can bring a great deal of meaning to it. Bring it out of yourself, create it within yourself, and bring meaning to things. I think in some ways that's even very compatible with an evolutionary philosophy that things are what they are simply because that's the current state of its process, and it had no purpose or meaning. It just is, and but that doesn't mean we have to live meaningless lives simply because there's no meaning outside of ourselves. Bring meaning to it. I'll tell you what, you love your kid to death, right?
I do.
Yeah, and the meaning is found in this relationship based on what both of you bring to it. you know. And I think that this is where meaning is found in life. It's you bring meaning to it, and you bring a sense of purpose. You adapt to what is, you embrace what is, you accept what is, and you then from there dream of what could be, and the joy of the adequacy you possess in playing some sort of role in that. So, to me, that's the adequacy of life. That's where you feel good about yourself. That's where you feel good about life, and but I'll tell you what, if I was trying to look for meaning in things themselves, I'm sorry, I would be depressed. I mean, I've lost my house twice to a flood. The first time I couldn't get out from under it. I was in a house that had never been damaged by flood in its 85-year history, and then suddenly the whole place is destroyed. I don't have insurance. I can't get out of the mortgage. I can't leave. I don't know. I can't afford to buy two houses. I can't buy another one and still pay for the old one. I'm stuck. What do I do? I have to rebuild. Well, I found that, in the circumstances I was in, I just responded to them the best I could. That proved to be good enough. The truth is, there was no meaning in my life because there was a flood. But there was a flood, so I brought meaning to it. I found a way of responding to that challenge. We did pretty good. Spent 5 years rebuilding the house. We insured it. Got destroyed again 5 years later, but because it was insured, that time we took the check and said, "Let's buy a different house." So here we are in a new house for us anyway, and we came through that. Were those 5 years wasted? No, they were 5 years of discovering we were adequate to life. And we didn't find meaning in life. We brought meaning to the life that we had.
I have to agree with possibly viewers that have commented here, both about Pascal's wager or Pascal's argument, and I think that they're both significant. So I'm going to read the shorter one first. It says,
Sure.
Pascal, and then I'm actually going to respond from the Christian viewpoint, which will be fun. But Pascal's argument, if accepted, makes your life and relationships small, narrow, and isolated.
I agree.
The second one is, Pascal's argument is not just ridiculous, but quantifiably mistaken. To accept the existence of the Christian God based on no evidence is to lose much in life. Traditional Christianity robs you of your ability to make mistakes without feeling guilty or condemned. It robs you of your ability to accept other people or have a diversity of friends, no matter what you believe. It robs you of your ability to listen to people no matter what they're saying and consider arguments that are outside of the Christian. Exceptional or traditional Christianity robs you of many, if not most, of the most valuable aspects of a meaningful and love-filled life.
I think that's possibly true, and definitely true of many, many Christians. I mean, because they use their Christianity as a substitute for a life they don't have. And they turn their theology into something that makes not having a life okay. That, to me, that's sad. They actually use this as a way of not only dealing with an inadequate life, but of accepting an inadequate life.
But that's actually the response that I wanted to make, is that not everybody has a good life, and not everybody's capable of good life. I mean, sometimes you got to play with the hand you're dealt, is I guess the response I have to make. And I know we've discussed this in the past, but like you, have been dealt a decent hand. Yeah, okay, I didn't quite have as nice of a starting hand as you did, Bob. I grew up with divorced parents who were living below the poverty line, but they've worked their way up by the time I got out of high school to have a pretty comfortable living, and for me to have some nice things. I mean, I'm up here at my family's cottage that my grandfather, who was a doctor, bought 60 years ago and built, and I've had my entire life to come as a vacation home and swim. I learned to swim and water ski in the lake behind his boat, and it's something that the luxuries that I've enjoyed throughout my life are incalculably greater than the small freedoms and luxuries that, say, a child growing up in Ethiopia under extreme poverty or in Congo under extreme warfare and infighting, it has. And
Hmm.
there's times when you're simply, I mean, if we're going to make an appeal to needs, and even I'm going to bring up Maslow here with his hierarchy of needs, there's a point when, you know, the best you can hope for is a meal today. And in those situations, I can certainly understand the terminology, or the concept that there's no atheists in foxholes. I think that it's silly to say, to use the military analogy in that respect, because frankly, being in a foxhole is not the highest level of desperation that humans can reach. But if I was coming from a place of such destitution, I cannot imagine being an atheist in that position. It would just be such a horrifyingly disheartening place to be coming from, which is why I'm not just an atheist. I'm a humanist,
I
and I'm a socialist, and I believe that we should be caring for these people and doing everything that we can to make the world a better place for everybody, so that they have the ability to move beyond the desperation that forces them into finding meaning, and in a hope that something greater might happen after their terrible and objectively painful life of suffering ends.
I, I'm I'm going to slightly disagree with some of what you've been saying. I think that some of the people in the world who actually live in devastating poverty, many of them are. You see, you can't imagine yourself being an atheist in those situations. I think many of them would be better off if they were atheists or if they had a very different kind of theism, because I think a lot of them remain somewhat passive and complacent and apathetic about their circumstances because they do possess some sort of a religious attitude that this is their role in life. And I think that if they, I certainly don't want to put upon them the burden of their own freedom, because a great deal of the oppression they're under is something we should care about and be able to do something about if we can. But at the same time, I do think that free men, free in their hearts, rise up against oppression because they find it unacceptable. And I think that there's a sense in which sometimes theism is used as a way of justifying the world the way that it is, so that people accept the unacceptable roles they find themselves in. And I think that they change that, or be more open to changing it if they and changing it for the better. Whereas a lot of wars in various religious parts of the country have to do with whose religion ends up on top instead of really making life better.
I think that you might be right in that, but I think that that's placing an unfair burden on the individuals who are in that situation. Is
It
that
is an
it's
unfair burden.
possible?
I think you're right, but you know what? As unfair as it is, it's how unfair is that burden? It's almost as unfair as their lives are right now. Which is terrible.
Well,
But
but that's what I mean by why it's an
yeah,
unfair burden. Their lives are
yeah,
already so unfair. To then,
yeah.
I know you addressed it yourself, but to then give them or to hold them to an expectation of resolving that on their own when every card is stacked against them. I've got to say,
Yeah.
I learned how to play sheephead this weekend here, and I
Tell me about it. What's
lost
sheepdog?
and lost and lost and lost. It's just a card game. I mean, you play with nothing but sevens and higher in the deck, and get points, and it's got trump, and I don't know. It's based on a German game called like Nagelflagger or something. I don't know, but it is a game that I was playing against my wife's parents, and my wife and I were both learning, and we are. I mean, they're very, very experienced sheephead players, and her, her mom is not nearly so experienced as her dad in that respect either. But he was the one teaching us the game, and I guess the reason that I'm bringing this up is because even though my wife and I were both learning, I consistently lost and lost and lost and lost because by random chance, the way that the cards were dealt, I kept getting terrible hands. Now, of course, on a long enough average, that's not going to happen. Law of averages means that I will eventually come out of that slump. But some people start off their lives with that kind of a situation where there realistically is no way for them to win. They are
Right.
dealt such a terrible hand that all of everything is stacked against them, and there is no possible way for them to come up from that. At least not alone.
Yeah,
I think.
but no, don't misunderstand me. It's just that, for example, here in America, we experience a great number of freedoms, albeit some of them are disappearing in various ways. But part of the reason why we have freedom is not just because we're fortunate enough to have it, but we are part of a culture that grew out of asserting that for ourselves. And it seems to me that the way human nature works, that you can't give people freedom. They have to want it themselves. They have to be willing to do what it takes themselves. And if they don't do it themselves, I don't think that they don't understand it or they don't appreciate it. And in fact, this is one of the reasons why I was such a protester to the Vietnam War. These people were going communist. Well, you know what? They're going communist. There isn't anything you can really do about that. That's how they're thinking. That's the way they're being persuaded. Until they can be persuaded otherwise, that's what's going to happen. You can't go there and get rid of the regime and say, here, use democracy instead. It doesn't work that way. So I think that. In some ways, the tremendous opportunities we've had here in America come from the fact that we developed in our culture more of a proactive attitude in obtaining it. We understood the hard work it took to get there, and so we were able to embrace the principles that involved maintaining it, pursuing it, and all that. And I think that. This was proven in, I think, even in earlier Iraq, actually before Saddam Hussein, in that area. There were a lot of people who tried to fight in that area to try to remove a lot of the oppression that was going on there. And all they did when they knocked down one oppressor was give room for another oppressor to come up, because this is what they knew, And it's not to say they had never had the opportunity to fight for what they needed. They never had an opportunity to struggle for it. And I think that just like you can't help, what'll happen to a butterfly if you help him out of his, they really struggle to get outside of the cocoon. If you help a butterfly to get outside the cocoon, it won't be able to fly. Because it's the struggle that actually pushes some of the fluids out into its wings, making its wings work. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think we certainly need to end the oppression. But people need to pursue freedom and they need to pursue opportunity themselves. It has to be something that comes from within them.
I mean, I can't disagree with you that there is certainly a cultural responsibility to the peoples, and there's certainly a strong degree of reality to the social forces that are related to it. If we do, as we've proven time and time again, unseat a dictator or a tyrant, all we do is create a power vacuum, and that brings another one into place, and it's a crapshoot as to if this one's going to be better or worse. So
and
it's
until the
not
people themselves who are
can't.
going to be ruled are of a mind, I'm going to require that whoever rules over me has my consent. That is an attitude that is not easy to take. We're spoiled in the luxury of that attitude here, to the point where we're actually now starting to become apathetic and thinking that, of course, they're going to have my consent. They're going to work for it when they're not. But I do. It's just one of those odd things. It's not easy. I wish it were, but I do think we need to be active in ending the oppression, helping the person who is helpless. But I think we can only we have to be careful not to try to play the whole role.
Well, I think that the argument you're making is that it's a very nuanced battle, that one. It's sort of the give a man a fish, teach a man a fish argument. But I mean, I think we've discussed this one in the past as well, that you can teach a man to fish, but if you don't give him a fishing rod or the understanding of how to make one, or the equipment to make it, or any sort of tackle, he's still not going to be able to fish, even if you told him the theory about it. So it's something that if somebody has nothing, they're going to need something, especially in a
Right.
world where everything is owned and controlled.
You
And
can't
so
teach a
there's a
person fire
responsibility to those
safety
who
who's in a
have.
burning house.
I'm sorry?
You can't teach a person fire safety if they're in a burning house.
Exactly. And that means that I guess what I'm saying with that is that there's a responsibility to ease the suffering of others and more. That simply easing the suffering of others is not enough in that respect, and it will take time. You can't. It's not a one-time fix. We can just go, oh, we gave you food yesterday. Why are you not self-sufficient today? That's an I
I
guess
would
an
hate to say that
unconscionable.
sometimes it can be because we did give them food yesterday, so why should they become self-sufficient? Now that I don't want to, that can sound insensitive, and I don't think it's that simple. It really isn't. So what I'm saying is that we need to find ways of giving people that which they lack, while at the same time being fully prepared to wean them from that help as they gain ability to take that responsibility for themselves. And that's a tough thing to do. I mean, of course, that's the job of parenting, isn't it? You
It
love your
is,
kids,
and
and
there's a
it takes
significant difference between adequate, or adequate assistance for survival and sufficient assistance for self-reliance. That
right.
a self-reliance is not something that emerges on its own. If you take any newborn human and say become self-reliant, it's not going to work. It's
Yeah.
going to die of exposure. I mean we need to recognize that there's realities out there that people are not capable of handling as individuals in the environments that they're in right now. And if we want those things to change, the onus is on us to make that difference for them in the world. And I guess I mean we've gone on a bit of a tangent here, but
Yeah,
it's been a good one.
with meaning. Yeah. Did you know that anorexia and bulimia only exist in industrialized nations?
I didn't, but that certainly makes sense to me.
There's a sense in which those particular disorders have as a prerequisite the luxury that we enjoy as an industrialized nation in order for them to exist. There is a sense in which those problems can't exist except in a situation where people can count on certain things being supplied to them that give them the power to reject them as supplied. Whereas in nations where you struggle to make sure that you got to work on the farm, you got to work on the crops, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to sift the flour, and life is a daily job, just working on all the sustenance of life. These people, when it comes time to eat, they eat. you know
I'd be curious about individualist philosophy in the same respect. I'd imagine, and I guess this would support my hypothesis, or be a way to test my hypothesis as a socialist, that comes from a position of privilege. That if there are any tribal societies or societies under extreme poverty that adhere strongly to Ayn Rand libertarianism, then it would be a pretty remarkable aspect of reality to me.
I can't
doubt
picture that. I can't picture that.
I think
Ayn
that
Rand
socialism
philosophy strikes me as
or
being only
mutualism is
capable
sort of
in
the
people who
default.
are already coming from a position of advantage.
Right. It's interesting to me then, where again to return to meaning, the libertarian philosophy that supports that is a way of understanding meaning. It looks at liberty being an ultimate meaning, individual liberty and individualism to be an ultimate meaning and an ultimate goal. And the solution that this philosophy drives to then is to increase individualism and increase liberty at the individual level, or liberty defined as freedom from oppression, direct oppression and coercion. I mean, we could get into the details of that, but I think that the reality is the argument comes from the place that successful people always have a greater degree of liberty, and I think that that is a description that is attempting to be put into a proscriptive role that is not defensible in that respect. That we're not going to be able to say, well, because successful people have more freedom, if you give people more freedom, they'll become more successful.
It doesn't work that way. Yeah, and when it comes to this is one reason why I find both liberals and conservatives extremely narrow-minded, because I think that they tend to both be in denial of the true principles engaged by the other side. I think this is a both and kind of thing. And it's a delicate balance. And we're fortunate enough here in America to live with plenty of freedom, plenty of options, plenty of luxuries and things like that. So that we even have the luxury of pretty much doing nothing and still getting by.
It's true. Now, I have to say, we are running out of time, and I am running out of battery life. I'm hoping to make it fully up to the end of the show here, but I've been broadcasting off a battery on Wi-Fi here, which is sucking it down pretty quick. But I wanted to return a bit to the original topic of meaning, and a bit more to my statement that I can't imagine coming from one of those situations where we don't have the privileges that we do today. I think that atheism is a position that comes from privilege, and I have to recognize that in much the same way that libertarian individualism does. That it's not something that is even in my mind conceivable as a person coming from a situation of absolute destitution. I just can't see that to be possible, and in that I actually derive meaning in life. It is a goal of mine to get beyond that, to assist others in being outside of the cycle where they're in such dire need that the only place they find hope is in an afterlife after they die.
Yeah, that's sad.
I'm going to try to change a setting here on my computer real quick to see if I can get my battery to last another few minutes. But
you can turn the screen down, the brightness of the screen. That'll help.
What I'd been running on, so I just had to change it to the high performance mode where it doesn't shut off until the battery's at like 1%. But I don't know. On the subject of meaning, going back, I guess, from that tangent there, I wanted to make one final note here, because I think I may have to cap it off, is that this week I had an interesting personal anecdote. I was working, I do some contracting and removing some clotheslines in preparation to put in a fence. And one of the clotheslines that's made from the big 3-inch metal pipes, anchored into the ground by concrete, using a jack to do that. Had one of them cut. Long and short of it is one of the pipes stripped the threads that was connecting it and popped off, landed on my head. I don't know if it's been visible here, but I had probably a 20-pound pipe land on my head from a 6-foot drop. And it didn't cause me to lose consciousness. Luckily for me, it glanced off more than anything, but it did certainly cause me a lot of pain. And was there blood everywhere? It was scary for me. I was working alone, and I had to, make the decision: was I going to call a friend or an emergency vehicle, or drive myself to the doctor to get this looked at? And I did make the latter, which may have not been the best decision. I didn't end up having any sort of signs of concussion, but it made my wife, Anne, actually
Hmm.
do some more reflection on the realities of our life, and it made me reflect a bit more about the meaning personally. I mean, we hadn't even considered the possibility, aside from getting life insurance, that we might not make it. We don't have any sort of will or plan in place for if something were to happen to myself and my wife. And I don't know, sometimes brushes with mortality like that
Yeah.
really help
Yeah.
to put things into perspective.
Yeah, come up with a plan, and I'll tell you what. Before you buy life insurance, though, take a look at Susie Orman's advice concerning life insurance. I think you'll find hers to be unusual but insightful.
All right. Well, that is, I think, all the time that my battery is going to make it for today. So I'm going to
And you
have to
made it
sign
past
off
quarter.
right here at the end and remind everybody to stick around for The Unconventional Pastor coming up next with my co-host, Bob Graves. And, of course, to sign in again next week tune in again next week for Inspiring Honesty, for Clash Course that precedes it directly, where Joey and I are going to continue our conversation about polygamy and polyamory, or our debate about that, which ought to be fun. And actually, I can bring in a bit of today's discussion into it. And finally, I want to remind everybody that on Wednesday evenings, after Bob does his other Unconventional Pastor show, we also do Hangouts using Google+. And if you'd like to join us, please contact me via Facebook. My Facebook account is just Greg Brahe, and again, I believe I'm the only one on the planet. Or you can find any of us associated with the New Covenant group.
Oh, I think his battery just died right there. So if that's true,
Let's get another shot of that beautiful, beautiful face.
yeah,
There we go. That's lovely. Yes, he is gone. So we're
Yeah.
gonna hang up on him. Probably for the best, right, Bob?
I guess for now, yeah. It's his own damn fault.
Yeah, exactly.
No, we love Greg.
He's laying
We
on
love
his
this.
stomach there, and somebody walked up behind him and put mail in the mailbox.
I
while
saw
he
that
was
he's getting
closing.
photopunked or something.
Yeah. Anyways, we love Greg
Photobomb.
Brahe. This has been Inspiring Honesty. And hey, when you're lying on your stomach in front of a library, how can you be any more honest than that? Am I right?
I agree. Yes.
All right.
Yes.
We will see you in just a few moments on The Unconventional Pastor.